Hey YouTube, Joe Boy here. So today I want to talk about the perfect version of Gear 4th. Now, if you watched my last video, you'll know that I promised you a video in which I would talk about all of my thoughts about future Gear 4th forms in one video. And I did try and make that video, but just like the last one, it was still too long. There's just too much to talk about. So again, I'm going to split it into several videos that I will upload at different times in order to talk about my specific thoughts about, first of all, alternative forms of Gear 4th, and then in this video, what I believe to be the perfect version of Gear 4th. So I'm sorry about that, but it would seem pretty pointless to upload a video that was so long that the majority of the people wouldn't be able to watch it anyway. So this is what I've decided to do. Now, as an important point of clarification, this perfect form of Gear 4th would not be an alternative form, because I believe that all of Luffy's alternative forms he already knows how to use. This perfect form is not a form he knows how to use, because if it was a form that he knew, he would already be using it. It would be better than all of his other forms in every possible way, and so this is something more like the growth of Gear 4th as the story progresses. I think that it's very possible that Luffy may use Gear 4th up until the end of the story, while additionally being able to use Gear 5th or, any other gear aside from Gear 4th. But in order to make Gear 4th relevant, I believe that as Luffy continues to grow, so will Gear 4th. And so how will Gear 4th grow? And so honestly, I believe the answer to this question is actually pretty simple once you understand what Gear 4th is and how it works. So in my last video I talked about this, but I'm going to emphasize at this point in time, which is that Gear 4th can be defined in two parts, which makes it different from any other form that Luffy possesses, any other gear. And so the two properties that are most important to Gear 4th are, first of all, the fact that he blows air into his muscles. This is important. The second is that he uses Haki very effectively while using this form. As Doflamingo puts it, when Luffy uses armament Haki while in Gear 4th, or maybe even potentially, and this is a topic of another video I should do, maybe just in general, but Haki added to Luffy's rubber body makes Luffy just incredibly more rubbery. And so this increased elasticity Luffy uses to increase his speed, his power, and his defense. And this is essentially why Gear 4th is so overpowered when compared to his other forms. So the idea behind Gear 4th is very simple. Increase the size of your muscles so that you are stronger and faster and more durable. And then at the same time add armament Haki to this so that your skin is even more elastic, which would then increase these same properties even more. And so we know right now that Luffy has various forms of Gear 4th. And the major difference between these forms, the most obvious right now, is that Luffy changes the location of his Haki to various parts of his body to change the properties of those forms and the situations in which it's necessary to use them. So with Bounce Man, he adds Haki specifically to his legs and to his arms, which at this point seems to improve mainly his offense. He uses his arms and his legs to attack. So adding Haki to these parts of his body makes his attacks stronger. And then compare that with Tank Man. And so in Tank Man he adds Haki to his stomach, which purpose is to absorb attacks and therefore increase his defense, more so than his offense. So just take a moment and think about why Luffy has alternative forms of Gear 4th when considering Haki. Well, it's because Luffy has a limit to how much Haki he can use at one time. If he could combine Tank Man and Bounce Man into one form, I believe that he would, but he can't. He can't coat his arms and his legs in Haki while at the same time protecting his stomach, or at the very least it would be a waste of Haki. I think we know for a fact that Haki is the limiting reagent in what makes Gear 4th, because what ultimately defeats Gear 4th more than anything else so far in the story is the fact that Luffy eventually runs out of Haki. This is what happens when Gear 4th runs out. So, if Luffy wanted to create a perfect version of Gear 4th and combine all the strong elements of all of his alternative forms, if it's just these two or if there's more than this, then what would he need to do? It's very, very simple. Improve his Haki. If Luffy is able to coat his entire body in Haki, then he would have the advantageous effects of both Bounce Man and Tank Man and any other perceived form of Gear 4th at the same exact time. In addition to this, he could also improve his Haki to the point that even while using more Haki, he's still able to increase the duration of Gear 4th even longer. And then also an additional idea aside from this is that if Luffy didn't choose to cover his entire body in Haki, if his Haki just in general improved, then taking regular Bounce Man or regular Tank Man and then improving his Haki would also increase the duration of those forms as well. So yeah, I'm sure a lot of you will be going at this point, well, duh. But I feel like, a lot of people don't really understand Gear 4th that well. And so a video like this, I believe, is kind of important, just so that you understand what the possibilities are in the future for Gear 4th. I personally love the idea that Luffy continues to use Gear 4th all the way to the end of the story. I think a lot of people are stuck in the mindset that once Luffy finds Gear 5th or introduces to us Gear 5th, that Gear 4th and all the other previous gears will be useless. But I prefer the idea that Luffy will instead improve all of his gears as he introduces new gears, so that depending on the circumstance, one gear or another might be just as effective as using a yet-to-be-revealed Gear 5th or even a potential gear that could exist, Gear 6th. We should also consider the possibility that while Gear 4th may be limited compared to a future gear, it might be a safer bet to use constantly than a future gear. Let's imagine a scenario where Gear 5th, we don't know what it is yet, but perhaps it actually reduces Luffy's lifespan significantly if he uses the form. And so if this were to be true, then I would imagine that Luffy would only use Gear 5th when it was absolutely necessary. And so with that being said, as fighters become stronger, Luffy would want to save that form as much as possible. And so by increasing the strength of Gear 4th and the other gears, Gear 3rd and Gear 2nd, would allow him to face off against stronger opponents without necessarily having to use Gear 5th. And so it would give us reason to improve them. Enter Gear 4th, perfect version. But as always, guys, there's no guarantee that this will happen. I am not Oda. We do not know exactly what his plans are for the future of the story, but I do think that you should keep this possibility in mind. I definitely think that it's possible that Luffy may create a new form of Gear 4th that is better than all of his various alternative forms that he currently uses. But of course, if he does create such a form, I don't believe that it will occur until very late in the story. Obviously, Haki is not something that you can just, come up with an idea and then all of a sudden it improves. Haki seems to be something that is improved with practice, and with practice comes time, and we're nearing the end of the story and there's not a lot of time left. Unless you believe in the idea of the second time skip. So if it were to occur, I don't believe it would be right away. And the last thing that I want to talk about is if you've watched my previous video that I made just the other day, you'll know that I believe that there's not only one thing that's important to Gear 4th. It's not just Haki, it's also the placement of the air, or just in general, the idea of air in his muscles. And so if Luffy were to create a perfect version, I believe that there is also the possibility that he could improve how he uses the air in order to create this form. But this is not something that I'm going to talk about in this video. I do have some ideas, but they'll be directly related to future videos that I will make. So just keep in mind that while Luffy is improving his haki, he could also improve in some way how he uses or the location of the air. But yeah, guys, let me know what you think. Obviously, there is a lot of things to talk about when you're talking about this. Another thing I didn't even talk about was that from a literary perspective, it makes more sense, it's more fun to have multiple forms rather than to condense all of his forms into one. This is something that I believe audiences would just prefer Luffy to have each individual form. So you can believe that if you would like. But I still think a perfect version is possible. Let me know if you think it's possible. Like the video if you liked the video. I'd appreciate it if you subscribed. And as always, dudes, have a wonderful day.